So we'll start with our warm-up. We're going to do word at a time story. So if everybody could stand up and just make a circle so that you can see everyone else. I just didn't know if she You can stay sitting if you want to. We'll include you, but you can sit. Okay? So don't, between Nidia and Carlos will be Hinata. Okay? So word at a time story, if you've never tried it, is can be complicated depending on the level of students you have, but you can always control it in a couple different ways. You can control the length of the sentences that you make and just say we're only going to have like 3-word sentences to make it like subject, verb, object, very simple. So what basically happens is one person says a word and the next person in line says a word that would follow it or could possibly follow it. And when you get to the end of a thought, or what seems like it could be the end of a thought, the next person says period. And then a new sentence begins. And what you're trying to do is tell a story. But sometimes the story gets a little strange, but that's usually when it also becomes funny, okay? So just go with it. This is helpful to teach word order, especially so they can get a handle on what are the possibilities of what words could come next, okay? So basically just each person says one word. It is very tempting to try to say 2, but you may not, okay?
You can say once upon a time.
No, you can say once. Right, upon time. So I will probably start with that just because it's a pretty typical story starter. What kinds of stories usually start with once upon a time? Fairy tales. So you know if we start with that, you want to head in the direction of a fairy tale. Okay? So here we go. Once. Just time.
Princess.
From.
Princess who?
From.
Prawn?
Origin.
Oh. Okay, so let's talk about this. Princess.
What did you say?
Princess.
Princess Mary.
Okay, good. Why can't it be Princess from? What was missing? An article. Okay, so Princess Mary.
From Italy. And
Her.
me.
Night.
No, hold on.
Fiancé.
And her fiance.
We're traveling to
Snowy.
Okay, once upon a time, Princess Mary and her fiance were traveling to a snowy country.
Done.
Period. Good, yeah. Okay. Done, it's okay. That's all. Period is more than. Okay, good. New sentence.
They were traveling. They were traveling by
Sled. Okay, makes sense because they're or sleigh or sled would either one would make sense. Sled. Okay. Okay, they were traveling by sled. Period.
the next.
No.
Only one.
Next.
Can I say it too?
Next. Nope, you can't say 2 things. So next.
Next
Tomorrow.
season.
Next season. They. Why don't you go stand somewhere over there and you'll understand what's happening by the time we get to you. Okay. Next season, they.
Will.
Plan.
Dare.
Trip.
To. Real.
Period.
Okay.
But. They. Didn't.
Oh, hold on. Wait now. But they.
Look.
Okay. But they look.
They didn't.
They didn't.
Oh, they didn't.
Didn't look.
They look, but they
They didn't.
didn't. Okay.
Look at before.
At before, but they didn't look at.
Before.
They didn't look at.
Anything.
They didn't look at anything. Oh my gosh, these people don't plan very well. Period. Okay. But they didn't look at anything. Okay.
Today.
They.
Woke.
Woke.
Woke. Very.
Early.
Mm.
There.
In.
Castle.
Period. Today they were very early in their castle. Okay.
Tomorrow.
Will.
Fly.
To. They fly. I don't know. Just saying.
Mm.
Country. Period.
Okay. So you have these. It was cold. They decided to go somewhere sunny. I feel like this might reflect your own personal opinion. All right. Good. Have a seat. Thank you. So you can specify a genre if you want them to do like a mystery story or a scary story or a fairy tale or a monster, whatever. You can kind of give them a topic beforehand to narrow it down. So one of the things that many people said they wanted to talk about, we already covered using technology and kind of games for grammar. But a lot of you also talked about how difficult it can sometimes be to have a really large group of students, 40 plus. So we're going to look a little bit at some strategies for dealing with that. And we're going to talk about primarily differentiation and what that is. Is anybody familiar with that term, differentiation?
Yes.
What does it mean?
To be different from.
To be different from. What does it mean in the context of classroom instruction?
To differ one thing from another. The levels.
Okay, the levels can be different. Sure. Okay. Any other thoughts? Huh? The methods can be different. The materials can be different. Okay. Strategies can be different for how you reach different students. So we're just going to talk about some models for that and ideas about how you can implement that. Then we'll talk a little bit about assessment and listening and speaking. And then if we have time, drama. There's a lot here. I realized when I was putting it together. So this might leak into next week a little bit. It depends how much you guys want to know about it. But we're going to start with differentiation. This is not in the textbook at all, and I'm not really sure why it's not, because it's pretty common practice here in the United States, especially when you have different levels of students in a class. And I mean, let's be honest, that's pretty much all classes. So the main three ways that differentiation can happen. The first way is to base it on the content. So to make things different based on the content that you are teaching. Okay? So the first example, I'm just going to point and ask other people to read, because you guys are probably going to be listening to me a lot today. So just to hear other voices. Okay, Gina, can you read the first bullet point for me? This one.
Okay, help me with the word.
Utilize?
Utilize pre-tests to assess where individual or students need to begin study of a given topic or unit.
Okay, and we're going to look specifically at this one at an example of what that would look like and how to use that information to differentiate. Okay, the next one, Thais?
Use a variety of instructional delivery methods to address different learning styles.
Okay, so we have talked some, especially starting last week, about changing up the way you teach a lesson to try to meet the different learning styles and keep it interesting for everybody. Next one, Patricia?
Break assignments into smaller, more manageable, manageable parts that include the structure, directions for each part.
Good, okay. So when we looked at the project and you wrote very specific smaller tasks that went inside the project, that's one way to differentiate. Okay. Next, Heath.
Encourage thinking at various levels at Bloom's taxonomy.
Does everybody know what Bloom's taxonomy is? Okay. You might, but maybe there's another word for it in Portuguese. I don't know. We're going to look at it together. It looks like this. Okay. And just to be sure that you have sort of an idea about what that is, I'd be very surprised if you haven't seen it somewhere. Okay? So basically what this says is that there's a hierarchy for demonstrating knowledge. Okay? The things that are at the bottom, which is the widest part, are the simplest things to do. Okay? They require the least amount of processing. And those things are it's called knowledge, the heading. But the verbs that we see there, Louise, can you read the list of verbs under knowledge?
The verbs here.
Mm-hmm.
Evaluate.
Yeah, for knowledge, the first one, the bottom one.
Define, describe, identify, label, list, match, name, outline, recall, recognize, reproduce, select, state.
Okay. These are pretty basic. You're just asking them to recall facts and write them down in a pretty simplistic way. Okay, it's mostly, I have this knowledge and I can say the knowledge back to you, but I maybe can't do anything else with it besides repeat it. Okay. So you can remember things that you learned, but that's about it. Okay. The next one is comprehension, which is understanding the meaning. So taking it and looking at, really putting it all together. Tatiana, can you read the verbs for comprehension?
Comprehend, condense, describe, discuss, distinguish, interpret, locate.
Okay. Do you think this is like one notch higher? It's taking what you learned and demonstrating how you understand it and what your understanding is. Okay. Sometimes manipulating the knowledge a little bit. Okay. Which one?
The second one you said, comprehension.
Yes.
I don't know which I'm following.
So what these are, it's like the complexity or difficulty of the tasks that students can do to demonstrate their understanding.
Okay.
So the higher up the pyramid you go, the more complex or difficult the tasks become. And they require like more understanding of the material. Typically they also mean that the student is better able to recall the information and use the information. Okay? So everybody, did that help? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but these examples of verbs are
Yes.
the verbs that require more, you mean the base verbs.
Mm-hmm. Oh, where did those come from? So for example, okay, so for knowledge, okay, I would be able to understand that I'm asking a student a question that demonstrates just knowledge if I say something like, match the word with its definition. Or, define a verb. Okay, that's a very base level knowledge. They're just recalling facts they know and saying them again. Okay, whereas at the comprehension level, you're starting to ask them to change that information a little bit. Okay, so condense would be take a lot of material and make it smaller. Okay, so it's not just saying it back to you. It's saying it back and changing it a little bit. Okay. Now, I will say that of the things that typically we do in a language classroom, especially at the basic level, they tend to be down here. Okay, because they're the simplest, and when you have big groups, they're the easiest to grade. Ha. So that's sort of why we tend to work with these a lot more frequently. Okay, but they're not always. If you can use some of the other ones, that's great. Okay. The next one is application. So take what you learned and apply it in a new situation. Okay. So Katya, can you read the verbs for application?
Apply, carry out, construct, demonstrate, operate, produce, use.
Okay. So a little bit higher, you're asking them to take what they know and generate something new. Okay. Any questions about that one? Okay. The next one's analysis, which means understand the content and the structure. Okay. Manuel?
Analyze, compare, contrast, differentiate.
Okay. Remember like a couple weeks ago when we talked about how comparing and contrasting has a really high gain, like it's 27%? That's because it's pretty far up on this pyramid. It's causing them to think at a higher level, which allows them to take in more of the material, okay, and actually absorb it. Okay. Synthesis means forming new structures from existing knowledge and skills. We do some of this, depending on the situation. The verbs go off to the side here. Larissa, can you read those for me?
Compile, create, develop, generalize, integrate, propose.
Okay. Some of the projects wandered into the create realm. Okay, so this is the stuff we want to try to access as much as possible. And evaluation. Tell me.
Appraise, assess, criticize, defend, evaluate, justify, support.
Okay. So it's can they take what they know and make a statement of judgment about it? Okay. Can they tell when it's correct or incorrect? Why is it incorrect or correct? Okay. Can they begin to make value judgments about what they're doing? Okay. So basically the idea behind Bloom's taxonomy is you want to try to encourage at least some activities at the top of this pyramid to give a depth of learning, because sometimes we focus on breadth, like getting as much knowledge into their brain as possible, and we don't always go deep into something to get them to really think about these types of issues. So, yeah.
Can we compare this pyramid with those levels that Piaget made? Something like that.
It's
because
similar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because knowledge you have to do certain levels,
Mhm.
age levels.
Yeah.
So we can do synthesis and evaluation when you're learning something from undergraduate level.
But I don't think I think students at a younger age are capable of doing
Oh,
these
yeah.
activities. So, I mean, it has some similarities in a certain sense, but I think at any age, a student is able to attain higher levels of knowledge on a particular subject if they've been given enough
Yeah.
exposure to it and opportunities with it.
It's like by not for the age, but the capability of this
Sometimes
person.
it is with that, yeah. Sometimes it does have to do with capability. Okay, so I didn't want to say Bloom's taxonomy without making sure you understood what it was. Okay, so this is something to kind of be familiar with if you weren't already. They reference it all the time here in the U.S. In fact, a lot of the time when you get evaluated, if you're teaching a class and your observer comes in to observe you, they'll be looking at how many of the tasks reach these more difficult levels of learning. Okay, okay, and then the last bullet point, Valkyria.
Choose broad instructional concepts and skills that lend themselves to understanding at various levels of complexity.
Good. Okay, so picking these concepts that are pretty big and realizing that not all of your students are going to achieve or attain the same level of competency in that skill. And that's okay. Okay, especially as long as they meet the basic that they have to do on the tests, right? And a lot of you have said they achieve that minimum because they know they have to, okay? But it's how can we make tasks more complex for those who want the challenge and less complex for those who can't really handle it, okay? So an example of how you would do something like this, this would be utilizing the pre-tests to assess where someone is and then moving forward with it, okay? So, for example, on Monday, let's say I go to my class of 40 students or whatever, and I give them a pre-test about present tense verbs. At this point, I have taught them nothing about present tense verbs, okay? I give them the pre-test. I might have some of the questions in English and some of the questions in Portuguese, okay? And then I take that and I look at the information, okay? Then I discover that my students are at 3 basic levels, okay? So maybe the first level is they understand the present tense in both languages. The second level might be they understand it in Portuguese but do not understand it in English. And the third level would be they don't understand what the present tense is in either language, Portuguese or English. Okay? But you might have, so this is just what I extrapolated, but you might have, 3 levels of those who don't recognize it in either language, but some are more severe than others, you know what I mean? So you basically are trying to determine where your students are before you begin the instruction. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And then Wednesday, I would group my class based on the results here. So for example, if these were my 3 groups, okay, the ones who know it in both languages, ones who know it in Portuguese but not English, and those who have no idea what it is at all, okay? I'm at group 1, who already knows both, might read a short story in English and look for examples of the present tense. If they finish, they'll write their own short story using the present tense. And if they finish, you might have some fun magazines for them to read in English. Okay? Work will be mostly independent for this group because they pretty much already know what they're doing. Okay? Maybe designate a group leader just in case there are any questions. So if you take the person who's got the highest score on the pretest, you could make them the group leader. Okay? Group 2. They're half and half. They already get the concept, right? But maybe not in English, but in Portuguese. So you could show them a little video about the present tense in English. The video could be in Portuguese, telling them about how it works in English, right? And then give them some simple practice and have them write down any questions. There would be a group leader that you would designate. And then the third group is where your attention would primarily be focused, because they're the ones who don't understand anything. Okay, so that's where you would spend the most of your time telling them how it works in both languages, probably starting with Portuguese and then working your way up to English. Okay, so this is what differentiated instruction looks like when it's based on content. Okay, does this make sense to everybody? Okay, so this is just an example of one of those bullet points to give you the idea of how it works, okay? So now, after you've done this, at least you can pretty much know that the whole class has some understanding of what the present tense is, and you can move forward with your other activities. So this is not something that is sustainable to do every day because it's a lot of work for you, because you're basically making 3 different lesson plans. So it's not something you can do every day or long term. But it is a good way to start things, especially when you know you have really different levels. Okay? And then you can go forward with the stuff you already do, like groupings. Okay? Okay? There's also a second category. This is where it's based on process. Okay? So instead of content, which is what you're teaching, now it's process, how you're getting the information to them and how they're processing it. This is pretty small. Rosanna, can you see the first one? Can you read it for me, the first one?
Provide, the first one provided. Yeah?
Yep.
Provide access to a variety of materials which target different learning preferences and reading abilities.
Okay, good. So this would be maybe multiple intelligences or auditory, visual, kinesthetic, or whatever. Next one, Fatima?
Develop activities that target auditory, visual, and
Kinesthetic
learners.
Yep. Okay, good. Next one, Carla?
Establish stations for defining based independent learning activities.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so stations, we'll talk about that and I'll show you an example. Okay. Sandra?
Create activities that vary in level of complexity and the degree of abstract thinking required.
Good. And this touches a little bit on the taxonomy again. Okay. And the last one there, Swami?
Use flexible grouping to group and review a group of students based on factors including content, ability, and assessment results.
Good. So this is kind of tied in a little bit to the first one. All right. So you can see where the things from the content are sort of filtering down into the process. Any vocabulary questions here? Because I heard a couple people muttering.
Excuse me?
Any questions about any of the vocabulary here? I felt like I heard some people. No? You're good? Okay. So we're going to look at 2 examples here for how this will work with the process. Okay. So, for example, after I practice, I know. I now want to know how much they understand about the present tense. Okay, so we did some pre-testing, we did the instruction, I got them all back together. Now I want to see, do they have it? Okay. I might give group 1, the group who already knew what the present tense was, I might have them write a quiz for another student. Okay, so instead of completing a quiz, I would get them up higher on that Bloom's taxonomy and actually have them write a quiz for their classmates. You could actually use the quiz for future sessions or a different class period or whatever if you choose to. So that's really the application where they're using the knowledge. Group 2, which was they were familiar in Portuguese but not English, I would maybe give them a short like biography or whatever, and ask them to distinguish between present and past tense and explain why present tense is used when it is. So it's not just identifying past and present, but why is the present tense getting used when it's getting used. Okay. And then the third group would just be the kind of tests we often tend to give where it's fill in the blank style, just asking them to use the correct form of the present tense. So you would really have like 3 different levels of assessment. They're still all understanding the present tense, which is probably what they'll have to do on that final test, right? Are the final tests multiple choice? How do they work? Mix?
Yeah.
Okay.
Match the columns.
Matching, multiple choice, what else?
Dissertation too. Some.
Like a short paragraph or essay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, any questions about how it's short?
Very short.
Or what they're supposed to write is very short. Okay.
Like, see if they understand some paragraph, the main idea or something like that.
Okay. WH questions, things like that. Okay. All right. So you know what that has to look like. So as long as all of your students get to that basic level, you can kind of play a little bit with these other groups and get them to sort of expand on what they can do. Okay. Any questions about how that worked? Okay. Another example would be to use learning centers or stations. And so today we're just going to do a little example activity because I want to switch it up and not have you listen to me the whole time. We're going to examine famous literary characters today. So we have five stations, and you will get to choose which station you would like to be at. So you have a choice of being a performer. Do you secretly long to be an actor or actress on the stage? If yes, you will go to station 1. Okay? Station 2, artists. Do you love to draw, make pictures, play with visuals? You will go to station 2. Okay? Station 3, musicians. Do you love to listen to or write music? Then you will go to station 3. Sing, whatever. Station 4, readers. Do you prefer to sit quietly in your room and read books? And that is a really good idea of fun to you. You will go to station 4. Station 5, puzzlers. Do you like to figure things out and solve puzzles? Okay? So those are your choices. Okay? What I would like you to do, we're just going to label the stations. If you're a performer, okay, I want you to come here. If you are an artist, here. If you are a musician, here. If you are a reader, there. And if you are a puzzler, there. Okay? Go now, pick a table. Puzzles is right back there. Okay? Performers, artists, musicians, readers, and puzzlers. No. Musicians. You just choose what you're interested in, and then I want you all to have basic. Puzzlers back there. Artists are here. Musicians. Are you guys all puzzlers? You're all puzzlers? Okay, you can lead over to that table if you need to sit. You can sit there too. This is artists. Alright, so performers, we have only 2. Artists, musicians, readers, puzzlers. Okay, so here's what's going to happen. I didn't want you to choose based on the activity. Everybody's going to look at literary characters, but you're all going to do it in different ways, okay? The performers. You have Romeo and Juliet as a play, okay? You also have a variety of fun costumes.
Oh my God.
So you may wear the wig or the hat or what have you, okay? Oh, we have one more. Okay, one more. Now, artists. You have a list of famous literary characters, okay? I would like you to choose one of them and draw their picture with the short description. You have art supplies. Okay, here are the characters. Just choose one. Okay? Like one for each of you. One for each of you. Musicians. You are going to choose a famous literary character from the same list and write a song about them to perform for the group. Yep. Now you can just write it to the tune of the song you already know. Okay, they're your instruments. You have a drum and a kazoo. Readers, you guys have a selection of books that include these famous characters. You may each pick one. And puzzlers, you have a crossword puzzle with the famous literary character. I will give you 15 minutes. 15 minutes to enjoy your activity. 15, Juliana. Okay, so I'm going to give them 15 minutes to do this, and you don't need to see it, I don't think.